Well, welcome. It's back to the ITAM kitchen, the place where we have all this talk about ITAM. I mean, who would ever talk about ITAM in the kitchen? We do. And from there, we have our guests, Rob Collins here joining me today and making this happen. And Rob and I were just talking. Sometimes it's amazing. We have these epiphanies that occur just before we're about to go into a meeting or something like that. So if that happens to you, don't feel alone. It happens to all of us. That's the whole idea. And that's also why we even do this live. This is not scripted. The only thing that's scripted is we have a little bit of a use case we're going through, a little bit, but that's the only thing that's outside that conversation is real. The conversation is lively. The conversation is vibrant because it's about you. I want you to understand what we go through as seasoned individuals going through that path. And for those that don't know me, my name is Mr. Bill, I'm a recovering IT practitioner, hardware asset management, software asset management, configuration management. I did FinOps before it was ever cool even called FinOps. I'll put it that way, right? I was looking at that, some of the things on FinOps, like I did that 30 years ago in asset management. Why do they call it FinOps now? But anyways, that can be a whole separate discussion. But the whole idea behind the ITAM kitchen is how do we collaborate? How do we think? How do we align ourselves? How do we have that discussion to help inform others, help bring that awareness next step? But as we drive into this, I need to fix the screen. I saw something that's not quite right here because it's live. So hey, you're gonna see the messy middle. We'll put we'll say it that way. But Rob, why don't you introduce yourself and I'll fix the screen.
Absolutely. Briefly, I'm Rob Collins, and you see, I've been a practitioner, let's say, within ITAM and IT operations and other areas, for instance, of IT management, for going on 30 plus years, starting all the way back when I was in the United States Marines and did stations, and then through 2 state agencies, and then in some private consulting practice again around ITAM, IT asset management. Of course, those things, they cross over and they, into other silos as well. So there's work going on around that. And this is one of the things that we'll touch on, I guess, within our discussion today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes those disciplines and what we just say, oh, here's an additional task we had to our plate, don't realize it becomes a career, lifelong journey for us, isn't it? It's amazing how that works, isn't it, Rob? Just the little things. And that's how we ended up coming into it. We kind of, if you want to say fell into the role, we did, sort of, but we? Or were we meant for the role? That's the other part. What's really driving us? Yeah, because that makes it even more fun. And we have to remember that's another reason why I brought the ITAM kitchen back, because ITAM can be quite boring, right? We're data analysts. We're helping put out, it can be quite boring. But for me, and Rob, I think you agree, it's never been boring for me. It's never been boring for me. It can be a little overwhelming at times, which is usually self-defined. But it's never boring. Yeah. So on that note, let's talk about the use case, because this is the inherited environment, and we've been doing this. This is week number 4. We've gone through 4 different scenarios, and what we do is on each Monday we've been doing the triage. Look at, okay, how do we propose it? We're going to go through some review in a second. On Wednesday, which today we're talking about stabilization. How do we stabilize the environment? Say, okay, where are we? How do we move forward? And then on Friday, we also look to say, okay, what's the 30, 60, 90-day plan? What's kind of that go-forward strategy we want to work with, the teams, et cetera? What's that? And here's what we found. I'll give you a little inside secret already, right? Every week is a little different. You say, wow, you're doing it. It's very methodical, et cetera. It's like, it sounds like it. But Rob, I think you and I both agree. We're amazed at kind of some of the outcomes. We've been kicking tires on this, but the discussions, because the environments and scenarios are different, they're different outcomes every time, which is kind of cool, right?
And the thing is, they model like real life examples. For instance, so like last week we were talking about cloud repatriation. That's come up many times, in the world and industry. And that's just one of those use cases. And like Bill said, what we're doing basically, at least for this month, right, is we're doing that same approach, but for 4 different scenarios. This is the current scenario.
Yeah, so this week is about a merger and acquisition, which never occurs in our world, especially today, merger and acquisition. But this is between 2 services companies, global service integrators, or GSIs is the acronym we typically use in this world. Obviously, I'm very familiar with. Just came from that environment, been around that type of environment for 30 years on and off, in different aspects. But it doesn't mean I know it all. By no means, because it just means that I'm used to herding cats. I'll put it that way. Right? I'm used to herding cats in large environments. Coming with a background and just from places I've been, whether it's HP or Vanstar or Computerland or CompuCom or GE Capital, HP. So I saw a little bit of that there, or even being part EDS, is you have different ways of looking at it, right? And that's what we've been talking through. So let's review a little bit. And Rob, feel free to interject as I go through this. You see something, okay, say pause, as we always do. We're very collaborative on that side. Let's walk through it, because with this global service integrator, what it is it was a U.S. firm purchasing a European firm. Right. And they said, okay, let's bring it together. let's bring this team together, make it happen. Of course, what was the CIO? The CTO says, I want unified 90 days. We'll just say there was a slight chuckle of that, but that's okay. We're going to start seeing progress in 90 days, but 10,000 person in organization services, everyone's going their different way for helping support customers. That's rather interesting.
It's a start.
But it is. But the whole idea is we want to synergize the savings. That's what the CFO is looking for here, right? The European team feels that they're being steamrolled because of the U.S. That's not unusual in the merger and acquisition. Sometimes it can be either way. I've seen a little bit of others. And as far as ITAM and SAM, as it's put here, they're just overwhelmed. There's so much happening, different processes, how we're looking at it, how you do procurement. We talked about it a little bit that as well. And for maturity readiness, we'll just say it's a level 2 out of 5, thereabouts. Some maturity, immaturity, it's all across the board of both organizations. But let's walk through a little bit what we talked about on Monday real quick.
Yeah.
Because we talked about, to help kick this off, just to get a little bit of stabilization, right, is how do you do that kickoff and initiate, identify who your sponsors are, right? Look at the people, process, technology, and governance, and have that discussion up front to help set expectations. Because sometimes you don't know who's going to be in the room until they're in the room, right? And that's typical. That's not unusual for services organizations. You have a good outline, say who's here, but you're also going to identify who's not there. Whether you're talking about the finance, services, IT, management, et cetera. I'm sure they heard about this again there, but that's okay. But being able to say, okay, let's get the right team members into play, because you also got services team members in here too for departments when you start unification, things like that. Because the most important part is quite critical. Actually, I'll do this already. The business can't stop, right? The business stops. There's no need to worry about this. We're done. We're cooked. It's in the story, right?
Zero impact.
That's good. Yeah, exactly. We're looking at the people, the process, the data, results, any regulations, the customers' environments. How's that being important? Also, to figure out, okay, what's our real scope here?
Yeah.
And that's the important, because we're gonna have to refine it. It can't be just everything. Well, we're gonna make it all happen. Well, make it all happen. Well, we didn't get to where we are by it just happening.
On that, right, there are two things that stood out for us, especially around this, right? The U.S. firm is acquiring a European Union firm, right? Some of the key things that we talked about is we have to understand what that regulatory environment is within Europe so that business can continue to move forward in case we need to make any adjustments to the overall company management, so its policies to meet with regulations. And around the business activity, what we're really doing someplace in this exercise is we're going to be looking at the acquired businesses, and there's going to be an alignment between the business objectives, how IT supports those, and more important, of course, from our perspective, is how ITAM contributes to those business objectives. This is the point that'll take us through much of what we're going to be doing.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that little additive in there, Rob, because this is going to be continual improvement. That's how this works. It's not about, okay, one and done, because it's time and resources, right? And resources can monetarily, it can be the resources available to actually perform the project. It can talk about how you're dealing with customers and those changes. You have a lot of moving parts and you need to be strategic in how you look at this. That's why it's going to be important for the roadmap. And it's not going to all of a sudden just happen. It's got to be over a duration. Nobody likes that answer, but after being through a couple of these type of activities from a couple different facets, it's the way it works. Because trying to move a big ship is not easy, right? And it could be a small organization too. We don't have lots of people, right? Hold on 1 second. Somebody's calling it. There you go.
And related to that, like I was part of a consolidation exercise almost a lifetime ago, it seems, right? Where we had like 18 different divisions and offices, each had their own IT support, right? And it's sort of relative to what's happening in this scenario. I was fortunate to be a part of that consolidation. So we were able to put a proper team in place up front to sort of determine the who and the how, as far as how those teams were all going to merge, who is going to be kept, and how service wasn't going to be interrupted, but now we have to manage it on a much broader scale, scaled up considerably.
Yeah, and to your point, you have some what do you call it, the key stakeholders that are involved. That kind
That's
of
right.
charge. Just realize that the key stakeholders not being in charge, you might have say 10 or 20 of those. That's great. But it may be 200 feet. It might feed into 200 other individuals to actually make this all happen, or more. It depends upon it. You may have onshore, offshore, depending upon your environment, and what's happening here. There's all sorts of different resources, and you look at that cost justification. Because no one likes change.
But what maybe?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna turn this on. Say that. Where's my phone? I love when iPhones don't work right. Perfect. It's technology. That's our life. That's what we do. Deployed in the first 90 days, we'll kind of figure out, okay, what's that level of effort? Try to put that in place. We're talking about business cases and stakeholders, mission statement. We talked about some key parts, also identify some key milestones. And this is going to actually roll into Friday's discussion, is what that's going to roll into. But what we also talked about on Monday, that actually we've not done before, but this was a great exercise, is we talked about who, which groups, and we just kind of threw a swag out here, are going to be involved with this, right? And this all of a sudden we're morphed in a good way, because you realize your teams, you have your IT infrastructure, service desk, your data center, some tools teams in here, ITAM and SAM, you intermix with the finance group, all that stuff, right? But you start looking at the different subgroups within your major areas, then you start realizing who else needs to be involved. And I think this masterclass perspective, that was extremely critical, Rob. As you start to finance, procurement, start putting out vendor management, you talk about the services, and even the IT team, this could be more restrictive than that, right? So you could talk about your network team. We don't have those guys listed in here. I'm not trying to split them. It's just we ran out of time, honestly, on that part. But you kind of get the gist of this. Is saying you have to figure out who's there, and you also have to figure out who's not in the room that you need to have in the room. Right. And that's the important part here, right? There's the services delivery team. Can't forget them. They're actually the ones bringing in the income, so we can actually leverage it internally. We also threw HR in here as well, because we're going outside of country lines. GDPR becomes into effect. Not that we're not paying attention already, as well as the different people. And we also said OCM, organizational change management, put that in place. Now, are there additional individuals we can put and say in there? Absolutely, right? Maybe there's an SAP team you need to include. Maybe there's a ServiceNow team, development team you need to add in here. That's in addition to ownership, right? You have to get from billing systems and things like that. It depends on your environment. Again, we were trying to do a quick, I wouldn't say quick, we actually are pretty thorough here, actually, compared to what I've seen. Usually a much of a higher level than this. But this actually helps give you ideas like there's a team. This is effort. This is a mutual effort, a shared team effort as you go through this. And that drives us to our discussion for this week. right? Or today, I should say this week. Because the other thing we don't realize, we talk about a little bit about maturity, but when it comes to procurement, let's just walk through some of that a little bit. They say it's a level 2 out of 5, right? It's not unusual for services organizations to be kind of low on the spectrum there, because all they want to do is they want to get product out to the user so you can start billing, right? These are consultants. You're actually, that's our goal here, right? So you're billing. How do you put that in place? So we had a maturity 2 receiving. They said there's no visibility at all, right? Centralized point. So it's like, okay, opportunity. How do you put that? That's a level 1. Stock rooms. They said, what stock? We don't have stock. It's like, well, you have it. We don't track it, right?
Oh, man.
Oh, trust me. Deanna was with us right now. She'd be all over that, Bart.
Yep. Absolutely.
They said the staging and deployment's different by regions. Not unusual, not unexpected. And maybe that's where it needs to be long-term as well. So you have to keep in mind, okay, uniformity. You have to have uniformity to a degree, but also realize that because of how, I'll say, if you're in the U.S., we're used to things happening. We have kind of freewheeling. We can go between different states, right? When we talk about in the European Union, they appreciate and respect each other in different countries, absolutely. But trying to ship things between countries and within there is a much different story than how we look at it here in the States. Here, we're worried about just moving it to putting a different, say, oh, and it's now in Tennessee versus Georgia, right? Or Iowa or maybe Florida, whatever. We just say, here's the next state, we deal with it accordingly. In Europe, they look at it much differently, right? How you share the information, how you look at that part. So a lot of consistency or inconsistencies there, but it's required just because of that locality of what you have. Move, add, change. I'll say a haphazard. I'll say that's the 1 to 2 mark, right? It's not unusual. Sometimes you're calling the help desk, the offshore team. It's like, I need someone to fix this now. Well, they're going to call you back. This is not true. This is why you have those chat bots, and now AI is helping do some of these jobs, because you need kind of that quick response that you haven't received before. Redeployment, that's a humorous thought. I'll just leave it at that, right? It's a level 1. They don't think about redeployment. They have so much movement. They're just not thinking about it. And they said from a disposal perspective, it'll vary by country. Not unusual, right? But the records are always lacking. There's no closure on that part. And that's important as well. So as we think about this for stabilization, because we can keep going, right? These use cases we came up with are actually really cool.
Yeah.
They're actually pretty in depth, but actually it's we could spend an entire month just on these use cases alone.
Sure.
It's easily done. But let's talk about stabilization. We talked a little bit about our team coming together, but let's talk about stabilization, more of the environment, as I move the screen around here. What comes to mind as the screen goes a little bit bigger? We're going to go bigger, or we go smaller? Sometimes you never know. Okay. Sorry. Coming.
Much of this comes down to, let's say, a couple of things. One, setting and understanding the scope for the activity that's at hand, right? And the primary activity is assess all of those units that are being acquired, ensure that you're following the proper regs. And because we have many countries, there are going to be regs now that have to be examined, and regulations and other legalities in and around the business itself. So a team, for instance, an IP team and a legal team, right, needs to be pulled together in order to assess that, to make sure that this goes through smoothly and with as little impact as to the business as possible. Operations and sales all have to continue to run, but when you're bringing these other things in, you're going to have to look at, assess those things, and then begin to work around some of these deficiencies, for instance, that you've mentioned. Clearly, they should be worked on, and some of that work will begin within this particular phase of the activity that we're doing.
Absolutely. Because when you start thinking about the device types, regulations, the customers, things like that, right? For example, if you're going to say device types, you may say environment types instead, right?
Well, both, it's separate.
It is.
Yeah, they aren't the same. Devices are everywhere, but your environments, for instance, within, like if you're in a manufacturing environment or a healthcare environment, for instance, those things are siloed for security purposes, right? So if those things you can be compliant, for instance, with like HIPAA and some of the payment systems standards. The most important thing is to protect the data and therefore protect the reputation. And so you ensure that those things are kept to the side and they're managed. In manufacturing environments and in like defense environments, you're going to have air gap systems, right? Things where maybe you can't necessarily electronically do an inventory because it's totally separate. But somebody with clearance needs to be able to carry out inventories from time to time so that you can do that. We'll run those inventories within that system and then have those carried out whenever necessary. Let me see. And then, of course, the people. We're going to have to really focus on, and this is going to be the organizational change management. The people may or may not like what's happening, but it's happening. So to identify, let's say, what the concerns are and the pain points are for the people, and to mitigate those as best as possible within the constraints of this project, then I think that you get better outcomes. And in addition to that, you might even learn something from what's happening in Europe and decide you want to bring those processes or some of those policies over to the US.
Exactly. So what comes to mind for me, because you have this huge conglomerate, right? You have the internal systems. You also have your customer environments, right? There's one of the environment types, right? You know, a little bit of that. And device types are going to be all across the board, whether it's internal or external.
Yeah.
But what I would say is initially we need to worry about our own backyard. We need to start worrying about our internal systems first, right?
Yeah.
Start working with that, and then we'll bring the customers into the fold as well as the consultants. But if we have our internal systems, at least then we have to start, because we have it. It's within our sort of within our constraints. We understand our constraints at that point. There are resources, right? They're internal. It might be the finance team. It might be IT. It's like, okay, I'm going to use IT as an experiment. Services company is a little dangerous, but that's okay. But in the environment type, I would say you're internal first, and then you go external customer, right? Now, depending upon your requirements, I do know because some customer requirements have caused impact to the internal systems as well. So it just depends upon what you're happening, and that can occur. So don't be surprised at that. It's like, how's that occur? Oh, there are some specific requirements, and if someone wants the business, they're going to change entire business operations to make sure it fits that need. And I've known organizations to do exactly that. To win a customer, that's a long-term relationship from it. So there's benefits behind it. But when you talk about environment types, I would say let's look at the internal first. Just going to help us our conversation, right? And
absolutely.
How we make stabilization, right? And that could be, I'll just say finance. Still can't spell. HR, I'll say ITSM, billing, which is not always finance, by the way. Sometimes it is, sometimes not. In services organizations, it's sometimes separate, right?
Finance really is more internal to the company itself, and then they'll get, for instance, some of the numbers, like total revenue, for instance, and they'll factor that in to their calculations and their data. But sales unit is often separate, and then they interface with the billing so that they can count all that revenue and reach out. So there's a lot going on there too. Procurement is a really good one, because you have to understand procurement and acquisition for whatever it is that you're using to produce product for the customer or to produce those services and support. The other thing too about going internal is important first, because the main thing here is you're going to acquire all of these new business units, but you want zero impact to the current business as it is. And so starting internal is like necessary.
Exactly. And you might say, okay, let's hit the low hanging fruit, right?
Sure.
And you can say, okay, we're going to do sales, Finance usually don't touch too much until a little bit later, just because it's the criticality to keep the business operations in place. You might get it started, help set up some expectations. HR is another quick win. That way you know where some unification on the team, you make sure email addresses come together as well. That's a little bit of infrastructure tied to that, but you kind of get the gist of it. Service management, it's not unusual to hit that first. Once you have some unification happening, it's just some further alignment. That's a pretty big effort. Maybe you have a little task happening, right? For me, I would hit probably more of the procurement side of it. Billing, you're playing with dollars and cents. It's dangerous. Procurement, as far as how you're procuring, bringing things in, that's going to help drive some unification. For me, how I look at it is, who's it touching? You've got HR, right? You've got finance.
Yeah.
You've got your vendors / contracts. I have their contracts up here, but you can do it. I'll throw ITSM a little bit in here.
Yeah. ITSM is definitely going to be affected.
But you guys see where we just took that, right? Is think about the bigger picture is by hitting procurement, you actually have some additional focus here. And this is also ITAM and SAM. Don't forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's also important for those that are, that's going to be simple. We got to make it happen. We got all the IT stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about procurement, it's more than just IT. Yeah. And for those that are seasoned, realize it. But those that are new into the industry, we're just going to get the computers and bring them in. It's a little bit more than that, right? Think about here for a business, right? You have a lot of things happening, a lot of movements, and from that, again, we're adding 5 or 6 teams into it. We're just talking about procurement alone. You might find out, okay, people have to do their homework down here, which actually helps up on the top side of the additional titles for everybody else who's focused in it, right? Focusing. And you're helping really the internal systems kind of see it. It's a hub and spoke. By hitting one, starting with one, you realize you need some additional team members. You know what? While we're at it, let's go ahead and expand it on our focus and get the wheels turning, as I say, with these other individuals to say, we're starting here, realize it's coming all the way through you too. First phase of that project, right?
You'll be impacted anyway. So communication plan, something we talked about yesterday, that has to be crafted and so that everybody is aware that it's happening, just everybody.
Yep.
Because there might be some potential impact. And we just want to kind of address that up front.
Well, that goes back to the OCM, the organizational change management. When I say OCM, so I'm using an acronym like,
yes.
Okay, pick your name. We don't have any acronyms in the world. We don't have the HPs or IBMs or anything like that, right? There's no acronyms in the world at all. But when you start thinking about this, organizational change management, organizational change management, I'll slow down, there we go, is extremely critical to help make this happen. And you're going to need probably 1 to 2 team members at least, possibly 3 or 4. It just depends upon your level of effort. And being able to say, okay, how are we going to make this work? This also, you may also be a program manager tied to this too, right?
Yes.
As well as multiple project managers. You might need a project manager for each section and a program manager overseeing it. It's like, well, that's a lot of resources. That's back to my point. There's only so much you can take on at once, right? Because it's like, we're going to do it and we're going to merge environments. It sounds really cool on paper and we got to make it forward, and on paper you make it all work. Now the team has to make it work, and that's what we're talking about. How are you making the soup, right? There's lots of pieces to it. How do you make it? But that's what comes to mind for me, Rob. Is there a different spin that you think on this? So I want to brainstorm a little bit on this. Mine was, like I said, procurement, I think, kind of ties it in immediately. Is there something else that comes to mind, maybe from a different angle I'm not thinking of?
There could be, but I'd say, if anything, just open a point around monitoring for this, for instance, and if you find that another organization previously not identified has not been included, that you do a quick scope assessment around who and then engage that organization to the degree within scope of this entire project.
Bring up a good point is when you do that OCM outreach, right?
Uh-huh.
Like when that communication goes out, it needs to go to the entire organization.
Yep.
Even those on the consulting line, well, we don't want to bother them because we don't know what they're changing. They need to know.
Yep.
Everybody needs to be aware, because if all of a sudden there's an outage for whatever reason, as you're, I'll say, playing in the same box, right? If something happens, they go, oh, you know what? We've got this huge change occurring. Let me give them a little bit of grace. It's a little more accepting. Or maybe someone says, I need to be aware of that because it's going to impact a huge project I have forthcoming. Again, how do you get the team so it's on board? We typically don't think about that. That's not something you learn in the training, right? Industry training is, how do you deal with the team? Okay, there, I love that chuckle. How do you work and keep them informed? And that's the whole idea. It doesn't mean they have to be in every meeting, none whatsoever. But when you get an outreach, back to your point, Rob, I love the idea in that communication. Add all right, where to contact, who to contact.
Yeah. General advisories, please be advised. A really good short story around that is I was a radio operator when I was in the Marines, right? And I had come off of being an air traffic controller. And so advisories to pilots in the area were key to let folks know if they're coming into our aerodrome, what to be aware of, weather systems, exercises, bombing range activity, etc. So that was important. When we're doing storm monitoring on watch on the coast of North Carolina, that place is just one of the many targets that hurricanes come through and hit. And so ensuring that everybody that was on the watch team had a radio nearby and they could hear if there's an advisory, if the building is knocked down, if a road is obscured, etc. It's critically important at very least to notify everybody of the condition so that they're aware and can continue operating. And if they have issues, questions, or whatever, like you're saying, who to contact, ensuring there's that point of contact for feedback and for any other action that might need to be taken.
Yep, absolutely. Because I love the analogy here. You need to figure out how to weather the storm, right?
Oh yeah.
That's exactly what this is. This is a storm. It's man-made. It's man-made, but you have to figure out, okay, how do you do your best to keep the minions moving. Be respectful to everybody, right? And I say it's Minion in a very fun type of approach. Like you look at Minion in the movie, and we're very fun. Everyone has their role. The whole idea is you want to have fun as you're doing it. Look at a Minion. They're having a blast, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Because this is going to get stressful. There's going to be times it's like, really, we got to do that too? Okay. Everyone's getting a little stressed, but if you take that little bit of stress edge off, it makes the world as well as your work much easier.
Yeah,
to appreciate it more, right?
It helps set the mindset too for the people that are involved, and maybe for those that aren't directly involved but certainly could be impacted too. That being kept aware gives them sort of like that trust and confidence in leadership that they've got this, that it's moving along, and that folks with issues are never going to be ignored. There will be consideration for them. You're going to increase the level of trust across the organization if you do that.
And it brings up a good point. And Rob, I don't know what your thoughts on this, but I'm going to add a little nugget that we usually don't add.
Yeah.
When it comes to this also, and it's kind of the team dynamic we're talking about, having fun, et cetera, right? There is a time to work and there's going to be a time to play. And I would say your background in the military actually is a perfect example of that. So, and I appreciate your service. Absolutely. Is when you guys worked hard to the grind. You were there in the front line, because that's what Marines are. You guys were in the front line making that happen. But when it was time for you guys to rest and go play, you guys had fun. You was like, okay, we're having time for us, right? You probably remember some of those great moments.
Yeah.
We don't do nearly enough of that in this world. We don't do nearly enough of this for not just on this project. I'm just saying in general, right? We're working ourselves to the bone. And that's a good thing to take away is we've got to find some time for, I'll say us, to unwind a little bit, maybe socialize, maybe a social event or something like that, even as virtual. Think about how you can get to know that person a little bit further, because you might find out that you're connected in a way you never imagined possible, right? You want to add any more into that, Rob? Because that's a little nugget, but I think it's critical here.
Yeah, nobody parties as hard as the Marines. Except maybe the British Marines.
I love it. I love it. That was perfect.
Navy's second. They're just, those guys are wild.
I love it. That's perfect.
And gals.
Oh, no, it's awesome, but you need to find out some, I'll say some social.
Yeah.
I'll just say social activities.
Plan some of those, like around milestones. If the group has achieved a milestone within a project, then all right, it's time to do something, gather together, in an environment where everybody can be relaxed.
Or another opportunity I see is actually if you're ready to start your testing. You have all this time, you're about to start some testing.
Yeah.
But you need to get together anyways. You're going to do some training. If we're together, we're getting out. We're going to go out. Don't get too crazy. Okay, do you need to be operational in the morning? Or unless it's a Friday night that you worry about on Monday, so you have all week to recover. But you kind of get my point. Is take some time and get to know each other. Socialize a little bit. And I'm talking about, okay, let's go download a couple bottles of alcohol. You can do that too. That's up to you. I'm not trying
However you choose.
Yeah, exactly. But when you start socializing, you understand who the other person is, how they work, how they operate, some of the dynamics. I had that happen one time. I had it happen several times actually. I do it with all my customers whenever I get to know them, because when I understand how they think, it helps me better relate to them, so I know what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah.
And it's not trying to oversee them either. It's just the opposite. I want to make sure I can relate to them. And one time I did that working with on a project, working with a CM2B guy, and went to the CM2B owner and started talking with him. We never got to our core topic until like 30 minutes in the discussion, because we found out we were both band dads, marching band, and we could relate to that. It made us so we understood each other, and also made help us better respect each other as well, so we could help align on that and forget. But it brought the fun factor into a very interesting discussion we were about to have about the CM2B and asset management. But from that, you just never know where it's going to go. And I think he and I are still in touch, stay in touch even today.
Oh, that's great.
I'm just using those examples. Sometimes you never know, right? Some of those social activities go a long ways, but again, you don't usually hear that within projects, right? But I just want to bring that up here because it is very important, because when you realize that you're able to break that stressor down a little bit, it's like, you know what, we need to roll up the sleeves. I don't feel quite as burned out. If you're going to stay, I'm going to stay, and we're going to work through this. That's how it works, right? That's part of the teamwork. Okay, enough of bouncing off that one.
Yeah, we could do a whole session on that sometime. That would be great.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think we do need to do that. So we talked about the different teams, different systems potentially we need to integrate, right? We talked about, some of the communications, also some social activities happen here.
Yep.
What else comes to mind from some of the stabilization, right? Because the stabilization is, we have management, we have those expectations, right? In the environment. But it's also about understanding, okay, where do we better align each other? That's where some of this comes into play.
Yeah.
They're aligning procurement and what needs, the requirements. You put that in place. So you're getting some of your additional requirements like right here.
Yeah. I would say get metrics. That's really kind of the next thing. You can't stabilize this until you get really good intelligence and figures around how things are going current state, right? It also helps you to set that target, because future state is going to be the organization larger, greater in scope, broader across the globe, right? And so we've already touched on the IT and the regulatory aspect of considering new areas and new sets of rules. But we've got to have some metrics in place in order to make those, in order to help to drive those decisions and those actions going forward. So I think that that's really key. In so much as governance goes, governance is kind of a separate topic in that it's how you're going to assess or really to kind of control behavior, for instance. and control how processes are carried out. Okay, so that's important. So if you want to do a policy examination, for instance, of what you're acquiring, and then note the differences, right? See if you can bring them closer to the U.S. policy without breaching any of those regulatory boundaries, if you will, for lack of a better term at the moment. And so when you do this, right, then you're able to have a more complementary set of controls in place, so that the entire organization can move forward together. And
No, absolutely.
support,
Absolutely.
top level support is critical in these.
Absolutely, absolutely. So where I was going, the metrics and governance and how I usually tie those together is your metrics are being defined by your stakeholders, the key stakeholders, and your key stakeholders are part of that governance. So you're starting to initiate that governance activity. That's where I was going with the governance. That's why I usually tie those together on that part, and they're very complementary, right? You're absolutely right. You need to distinguish and delineate between the two, absolutely, because that's how you're monitoring it. And that's an outcome, because what I found happens, is say you're doing governance, you're doing metrics, and you work with these team members right here. Sales procurement, work with these individuals, right? They already know their metrics. They have them fully refined. You might have some additional team members in here that might come into play, right? But they're going to say, here's the metrics I need to stay operational, business as usual, right? And when you start monitoring that, they say, you might find out there's some additional metrics you need, right? Mm-hmm. That's also where the governance as a whole, everyone becomes congruent. You're congruent and say, okay, we know this is happening. Here's what we need, and here's why we need it. That's starting to push that positive governance initiative. I'm not saying you don't have governance at all. You might have change management in place or stuff like that. It's great. But this is going to say, oh, wow, we need to work a little bit further on this. Mm-hmm. Just back to your point, when you say the metrics and say, okay, we need to figure out who can actually perform approvals. You have two different organizations doing approvals, completely different, right? What's in Europe is different. And it may be by country versus the U.S., or it might be by state, right? Or just in general, it might be the entire organization is one, just by title, right? You have different metrics, but when you talk about the governance, you're going to say, what's really needed, right? Mm-hmm. What's really needed and how it's being done, because that's going to help also the downstream effect to the rest of the team members, right? So that's why I usually put that in place. You might say, well, that's going to drive policy. You're right. Drive policy, some policy changes, which again goes back to HR.
Partly.
Right.
Well, there would be policy changes across the board. Yeah.
Right, but your congruence as a whole, it starts going up, bubbling up, right?
Yeah.
I love the bubble scenario from Jimmy Buffett. If you've never heard that song, I'll give him a plug real quick. Jimmy Buffett, bless your soul. Bubbles is one of the greatest songs out there. But the bubbles will always go up. Mm-hmm. And because of that, if you understand some of the basics, then you're able to say, okay, let's figure out what we need to start measuring, right? Yeah. Including handoffs, et cetera. We've given a couple different examples. I haven't written those down, but being able to say, how do we look at this? How do we look at the bigger level, how we're moving forward? So no, I love it. The metrics and governance, absolutely. You were going down the support side. Were you talking about executive support? Or you were talking about stuff support?
No, executive support. You've got to have leadership support and approvals upfront and very public and communicated across. So that this way, there's reduced resistance to change, right? All throughout the organization where it needs to occur, if it should be. Plus, if you're looking for things, right? If you're looking for the differences in how operations are performed, right? Because you'll have that approval up front, then people will be less resistant, I would say, or there's better justification to push, to insist, or push back on any resistance to the change that's been mandated. Exactly. Executive support and alignment. If they're up forward and they public communicate that, then it can be said, look, this is what the leadership team is expecting us to do. This is what they're after. How do we get there? And then this drives thought and work that goes into that.
Exactly. It also shows there's congruence, and that's an important part for I'll say all the minions in the organization, because we have 10,000 plus employees.
Yeah.
Let's say it's 15,000, right? When they say, yeah, well, we have the leadership, they're coming together, that's a positive message. They want to say, oh, wow, okay, we're starting to make it happen. And they also identify, it's like, here's the top 5 items issues we're trying to address.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you didn't get mine in there, but you're working on something. You're showing progression, right?
Yeah.
That's important. Actually, I need to put that here. I'll put awareness and updates on the OCM side.
Mhm.
I just totally overlooked it when I was doing it earlier. But you're right. The executive support's extremely important. Being driven. Executive also, when you start doing your metrics and governance, you just had a spotlight put on that. So I'm giving you a heads up. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing, because when you start doing the executive support and alignment, it's very critical, because the executives are going to look for that, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely going to look at that. What else is coming to mind here? I think we got to have more of an ITAM SAM activity into this.
Mhm.
We talk about we can look at because we're talking about procurement, right?
Mhm.
So you talk about what products are actually being our vendor agreements a little bit.
Yes, because you're going to need to consolidate, examine and consolidate your vendor agreements, for instance. But that's an activity that should be occurring already, at least on an annual basis. So that this way you can kind of reduce the total cost of the business, and you align to vendors that are approved, that fall within all of those the specifications for the vendor, to make them a trusted vendor, and a reliable supplier. So those are definitely important. It's for hardware, for software, for anything at all that you're using. So from an ITAM perspective, yeah, you'll look at that. You'll look at like operational systems. You look like some of the other stuff like IoT, if that's involved within the business and being used to support. And this also brings up another really good point, especially around things like software. You could apply it to hardware too, right? And that's an application rationalization exercise that's done so that this way we're not using 15 different applications to do the same function. And the best example I could give of that, for instance, might be drawing programs, for instance. Everything from CAD to Visio to Lucidchart to anything and everything that's being done, right? If you have a purpose to view, typically only the readers are necessary. It doesn't matter where you are in the company. Apply the reader to those that have the need for the reader. And for those that are going to be doing content creation, right, then those are the ones that are going to get the full, let's say, Adobe Suite or a partial, depending upon what it is that they're being called to create. Adobe Acrobat, for instance, not everybody necessarily needs to construct PDFs, but there are a lot of applications that will help you to do that. So that need is served in a much less expensive product. But that's part of the reason why you do AppWrap, because you really do. One, you want to control the number of items that are out there, products, and two, you want to do version control the right way. Think of doing version control similar to the way that patching is done. So those kinds of operational practices and workflows need to be considered.
And on that note, the thing you have to be careful in that part
Mm-hmm.
is they're going to say, oh, that's a software asset management function. That is not a software asset management function.
No, it's not.
Whatsoever. That's a totally different role. And do not get conned into say, oh, okay, show me all the hardware and software you had on the different versions. You can provide data all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Application rationalization is not a software asset management task. It's become that in like the last 10 years. I started it.
It's not. It's a slightly higher level task than that.
Yeah, I was working in the organization when they started doing that. It's like, come on, guys, that's totally different. So marketing flood helped us get in that, have this quandary, right? And where you just want to be careful in that, because that can get you down a rat hole.
You can.
I use the English, right? Yeah.
Well, and and there's one other thing too. That's another place, for instance, if you're looking for areas for practical AI applicability, and just if you keep it internal, right, and you're only using certain models, right, that do maintain and guarantee your privacy and your internal protection of information, proprietary, et cetera,
That's very
right?
good point.
Then you can very rapidly do some of these assessments and these rationalization activities. It does take an awful lot of labor, off of the human beings. But then it also allows you to step in and do your necessary due diligence and quality control checks. Please keep that in mind.
No, that's a good point, and that is. Thank you for bringing up the AI. I wasn't even thinking there. That's why we complement each other so well. This is great.
Yeah.
Because AI, I just put like the product catalog.
Yes.
You can leverage AI to help you as an example for that, right?
Oh,
You can extract the information, but being able to say, okay, let's just tell me what I have here. I'm going to put this whole catalog out here. Please group it by category. And the categories might be off. It allows you to edit and say, okay, we need to fix it. That's totally cool.
Yeah.
But AI right here, that's why AI is there. I'll be brutally honest. That's exactly why it's helping you with that analysis. Now, you may need to tweak it a little bit, but that's a great example where AI can help you. And actually, even for your vendor agreements, you're looking at this, saying, okay, what's coming in, put that to your actual purchase data.
Yeah.
Huge. That could take it from weeks, if not years, to hours.
Yeah. There's another place too where it could be applied. I was just thinking about when you have your hardware written in down there, for instance, there's an awful lot of effort, at least in the last few years, towards sustainability exercises, right? So whether you just want to feel good at the end of the day about how you've protected Mother Earth, or whether you're very cost conscious and you're trying to reduce the total power consumption and therefore the overhead for running your business, right? That's just another area where you can leverage AI in order to do this against your hardware environment. What models are out there, what uses a lot of power, what's the efficiency rating of these, and you can move to higher efficiency devices, newer tech that falls within current InfoSec specs, and overall, and start moving the old stuff out and maintaining and managing a much smaller, let's say, diverse set of hardware. If you do that, that also takes the load down on hardware asset management and IT asset management as well.
No, I appreciate bringing that because that's a great point. Is as you're bringing that in place, is being able to look at you're not really increasing scope. You're just providing clarity.
Right.
That's really what you're doing, right? And it's like, well, we don't do it today. I get you don't do it today, right?
Right.
Clarity, so you don't have to do it later. But if it takes you just a simple query to add to it, really, I'll use the word, we're complaining about this. No, don't. Show the value add. That's you say, because when you go back to that governance and as far as the reporting, and they're saying, you know what, I did all of this analysis. I also ended the end of life as well as sustainability of the metrics to these as well. I know you didn't ask for it, but that's where we need to go anyways. I go, oh my God, this is awesome. Thank you. It's going to be well received is my point, right? At that point. So as we come up the last few minutes here, what else comes to mind? These are good. We've got some great points here, right?
And what else comes to mind? There's so much. I mean, this is one of those things. The world of IT asset management is, if you haven't noticed, nebulous. And there's so much that you can do. I've always told to me, if you find yourself with nothing to do, pick up a broom. Okay. Well, if you happen to find yourself with nothing to do in the ITAM world, maybe you want to consider doing, let's say, an afternoon exercise where you can do some efficiency work, apply AI, or review what you have, pull an inventory, look for things that maybe seem to be like wherever your organization may be hemorrhaging money, right? That's a great place to start. Find those, patch those up. In so much as this exercise today, there's just so much to go off of to kind of keep the scope just to the merger itself across the European entities. Gosh, I'm not sure. I know there will be things to add. I don't know what, though, without really.
What comes to mind? What comes to mind for me as we're chatting here is the handoffs.
Yeah.
The actual process and the handoffs. What data is moving between there? What processes are actually occurring? I say process from a high level perspective.
Yeah.
Because when you understand, okay, how this flow work, the actual workflow. I'll just call that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we've renamed it to. Is when you actually talk about the workflow and how it's impacting the different areas, specifically in your area, you're not worried about all the rest. You need to be aware of those, but you say, okay, for you're an ITAM and SAM person, you're right here, right? But when you start saying, okay, how's it impacting the rest, everyone else?
Mhm.
That's also where you start getting your metrics, your governance, you start some awareness, your executive support comes into play because it means you're part of the team, right? And that's an important part too. That's what comes to mind for me, are those actual handoffs. Because when you start talking about handoff discussions, at that point, you're being collaborative.
Mhm.
You're also saying, okay, here's how I can help you. How can you help me?
Yeah.
And that's important, right? To me, it's consulting 101. But I'm finding that consulting 101 type stuff today is not common sense. I'm just going to call it out, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's important for you to bring that in mind because when it comes to like all the agreements in this part, it's like, no, I don't want to worry about office supplies. I don't want to worry about building supplies. I don't worry about OT you may want to worry about, right? Or other things. Well, to me, I'll give an example. Hardware, software, office supplies, I do want to know about part of them. You know why? Keyboards are in that, right? You've got some different computer accessories tied to that. It's not just hardware, right? And that's just how they're labeled from a categorization perspective. Building supplies, I do want to know some of that. I'm not talking about, okay, I'm not talking about lumber, right? I'm talking about, okay, air conditioners, your heating and airing and cooling and how their computer, how their UPSs, right? It may not be building supplies, maybe that's the wrong term there. But building, whatever. So, but the whole idea is things for the building, right?
Yeah.
They're electronic, they're on the wire. It could be security, right? That may be part of this. You need to be aware of that from an asset management perspective. It's like, I know we're not tracking it, but we really should, right? Bring it in place, right? Actually, we didn't add IT security meetings.
Oh, yeah, there's that too.
Yeah. Again, we're saying this because this is a big beast. This is a big beast. Like your stabilization, when you start looking at this, you're starting to now have data to say, we now know how the business operates.
Yeah.
We're not have solved it yet. We're still working on that part, but at least I have a good baseline. This is helping provide that baseline to say, here's where we can start making our next decision.
Yeah.
And even though we're talking about the 30, 60, 90-day plan, keep in mind that 30, 60, 90 is from our time of after we're finished with this, because we have to do a little bit of this analysis first. This might be the actual first 30 days, just doing a little bit of this.
Quite a bit of it will be.
Yeah. And then we're going to say, okay, now let's worry about the next 30, the next 60, the next 90. I just want to put that out there too. So as we wrap this up today, Rob, this is another great session. You started, it just doesn't stop, and an hour goes just like that. I'm loving it. What comes to mind as far as one of our final wrap-up comments for today on the stabilization of this type of exercise?
This is all part of that plan portion, the assess, plan, and execute. This is all part of us and leads into the planning. So here we're looking at some of those things to include within the plan. And then, of course, Friday we'll be discussing where we go from there. So moving towards the exit days, if you will. It's 90. 30, 60, 90 has kind of been the frames that we've been giving ourselves, and we encourage you to think along the same lines. If you have any questions, of course, reach out to either of us. We can help in any of these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any comments, put them in the box before. If you want to share this, I just got notified by a couple of other folks last night. Oh, we love watching. It's like, okay, well, comment about it. Put it in the chat below.
Yeah.
Say where you're from, things like that. Even on the replays, that's totally cool because they're saying we love them, keep them moving. I'm hearing it time and time again. And by the way, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I don't have that prompt right in front of me, but it's at ITAM Kitchen on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe out there too. That's very important on several fronts. So again, we're doing it. The whole idea here is how do we stabilize this type of environment? And the part I want to remember, just kind of closing, patience. Patience is one of the most important things here when you start talking about stabilization, because this is where you have multiple egos, multiple dynamics, multiple scenarios come into place, and you've got to step back and say, okay, you're going to have to raise your hand for help at times. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Also be around a community of peers that can help you. I'll put a little plug in for the co-op. That's what we have a co-op about, right? Help raise the level of awareness, how you move that forward. And that's important too. And if you want to be part of the ITAM Kitchen for any of these type of sessions or what we have forthcoming, because about to give an announcement what we're going to do next month. Oh my gosh, we're going to have a lot of fun too. Next couple months, actually. I think we have like the next 3 months covered. It's not going to stop. We're having a blast. So I want you to be part of it. I want you to enjoy it. I want you to embellish it. But I also want you to be a part of a community that actually is going to support you. That next step. That next step. So with that, that's going to wrap us up for the ITAM Kitchen for today. So thank you, Rob, for all your contributions. This has been awesome. Sure what just
Thanks so much, everybody.
Say, yeah, appreciate it. And we'll see everyone else see the rest of you on Friday for session 3. Look forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Bye, folks.